Now, as for the term paganism, the most widely accepted definition of paganism is complicated. It's complicated because we live in a mostly monotheistic world, and so we think in mostly monotheistic paradigms, even if, like me, we are not monotheists. Now, one of those monotheistic paradigms revolves around the very idea of defining a religion. That is a very monotheistic thing to do. We modern Western people have fixed ideas about the nature of religion. So if you're a Muslim, you follow certain diets and strictures. If you're Jewish, you follow certain rules and strictures. If you're Christian, you pretty much do whatever you want. You just ask for forgiveness at the end. Anyway, those ancient Mediterranean peoples, and by that I mean the ancient Egyptians, the Romans, the Greeks, the Thracians, and to a large extent also Persian peoples, Sumerian peoples, anybody dependent on the Mediterranean as a primary trade route. That's who I'm talking about. Those people had totally different paradigms about religion than we have today, except for, I would say, the ancient Hebrews. They are the only ones that are completely the exception to this rule. But all other peoples had no holy books, or there were some that it's debated if they were. I don't necessarily think they were, but even if there were very few of them. They certainly had no rigid dogmas and no special diets like wine among Muslims or pork among Hebrews. Although it should be stated that some rites did have a dieta, and someone might say like, that fool Tom Hatza, see, they had, strict diets. Well, not really. The dieta was only like a precursor for doing a certain ritual. The other 364 days or 363, whatever the case may be, out of the year, nobody cared what your diet was. Pagan religion was mostly just a give and take between a person and their goddess and or god, or goddesses and or gods. So what I mean is this: human beings in the ancient world had very little dominion over all things, as Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 to 28 would famously have us believe. Ancient peoples were at the mercy of natural elements, things like storms, famine, floods, earthquakes, fires. Now, not to say we don't still have those things, but we have much better methods today of dealing with those things. And on top of that, outside of these natural disasters, ancient peoples had very little dominion over social and cultural things, whether your family was healthy, whether your marriage would work out, whether the hunt would be plentiful, whether you would succeed in business or love, or whether you'd be called to go to war or survive in that war, or any number of things. So people had no control over all these things, and they were quite literally very anxious, in some cases terrified about it. So who really had control over all of that stuff? The Olympians, the goddesses, the gods. So the definition of paganism, as complicated as it is, can be funneled down to a very specific principle. You give the gods what they want, and what they want is things like incense, sacrifices, songs, prayers, and they will give you what you want: success in business or war, calm seas for a voyage, or a happy family life. As for the definition of paganism, that's really the best I can do. It's almost definitionless. I would even argue that polytheism is a more suitable term, because we today tend to see paganism as a religion in and of itself, even though it wasn't, while nobody tends to view polytheism in that way. The only reason this talk is called psychedelic paganism instead of psychedelic polytheism is that psychedelic paganism just sounds way sexier to me. That's it. No other reason. But when we think of psychedelic paganism in the ancient world, we ought to think about automobiles in this world. How does one define an automobile? Well, at its base, it's a vehicle for getting from point A to point B. But beyond that, like, what can we really say about this? There are many different kinds of automobiles that do many different things. There are ambulances, fire trucks, police cars, couriers, cement trucks, the list goes on. And an automobile can even overlap in its use. The very car that a person takes to go out, let's say on a date to the movies, dinner and a movie, is the same car they might use to drive for Uber, right? So psychedelic paganism works much the same way as what I'm trying to say. There is no specific group or action that we could point to and be like, oh, that over there, that defines psychedelic paganism. It is just too diverse. Now, in this talk, now that these definitions are out of the way, I'd like to focus on how this pharmaca was used in ancient religion and subsequently magic